Slogo meeting to order. At this time, I'm going to ask Senator Robertson to lead us in the word of prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you today, Lord God. We humbly ask you if you will bless us with the compassion, Lord God, and the kindness necessary, Lord God, for us to conduct ourselves and serve as examples to our fellow brothers and sisters here at the Capitol. God, I ask that you give us all the wisdom that we need to make the right decisions. I ask all of these things in the name of my God and my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Amen. We have one House bill on the agenda today. I'm going to ask Senator Alberts to step forward. House Bill 841. At this time, Senator Alberts, give us the LC number.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe you have in front of you LC 471445S.
Everyone has that, Elsie? All right, continue.
Thank you. I'm actually going to be pinch hitting for just a moment as Representative Ed Setzler from the House, because this is a House bill will be coming over. And here he is. Look at that. So if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to invite Representative Setzler, who helped pass this through the House. And instead of Representative Matt Dollar, who was the original House sponsor, he has resigned his position with the House of Representatives and is now working for the Technical College System of Georgia. If it's okay, I'd like to turn it to him.
All right.
Thank you.
Representative.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it's a pleasure being with you today. It is again an honor to be able to speak on behalf of the folks of East Cobb, and in an effort that as we step back from this is really an effort in representative government. You know, I live in unincorporated Cobb County myself, and you know, I think the folks in Cobb County represent their areas quite well. I think the commission has done their best. I think the services are strong. But from a representative government perspective, if you live in unincorporated Cobb County, you have one local elected official per 200,000 people. If you need a pothole fix, you need something addressed in a county of almost 800,000 people. The size of our commission districts are 192,000 people per district. So this issue of East Cobb is not a new one, as you know, but it's also one that's really focused on representative government. That if we've got legacy cities such as Kennesaw, Ackworth, Marietta, Smyrna, you know, Marietta has about 61,000 people population. Smyrna has 56, Kennesaw 32, Ackworth 28, Powder Springs and also are smaller. But if those cities have, if you got one city councilman per 6,000 people, the intimacy of knowledge and representation is just, it's a dramatic difference. And I think the folks in East Cobb have recognized over time that even though Cobb County really is a best in class county in so many ways, the desire to have the community they live in East Cobb to be represented by 6 council members and a mayor, a city that's you know the same size as or larger than LaGrange, Gainesville, Statesboro. You know, if LaGrange and Statesboro and Rome, Georgia can have a city because of their size and the critical mass they represent, shouldn't the 56,000 people in East Cobb have that same opportunity for representative government? So that's just kind of the flyover why this effort's in play. And I think it's one that we can all be proud of. I certainly, as a Cobb County legislator over the years, have supported cityhood efforts, whether it's in South Fulton, North Fulton County, DeKalb County, in this case, Cobb County. And I think it's an issue that its time has come. I think there's it's an issue that had been talked about for some number of years, and there was some confusion early on. But I think as you look back 5 and 6 years ago, I think those questions have been worked through in town hall meetings, in discussions, and getting the details right. And I think what we have before you now is an issue that we can have very strong consensus around. I have no doubt there'll be some manufactured opposition or some folks who have perhaps just a different, honest opinion. But when you spend time in East Cobb and you think about the identity that it has as a community of interest, with Chairman Dollar and others that have worked through the details and getting the details of what's before you in LC 471445S right. I think it's an idea that's whose day has come. Some specifics, Mr. Chairman. I don't know how deep you want me to dive into the specifics of the government structure. But at the high level, we're going to have 6 council members and a mayor. The council members will have 3 districts, 3 areas. There'll be 2 council members in each one. And each of those districts, every 2 years, one of those 2 council members will be up. They'll be on 4-year terms. And the reason we have the 3 districts, not the 6, is that's a little bit larger area that can still represent the community of interest. But sometimes we found when those districts get too small, sometimes it becomes a little fiefdom that's it's sort of hard to think more broadly. So in crafting the bill that's before you, try to find that sweet spot that you've got representation across the city, but that there's still a sense of scale to these districts, that there's sort of broader perspective perhaps than might be if we created small, 6 smaller posts in what we've done. Both the council members and the mayor will run on 4-year terms, 3-term limits each. So you can't have people serving 30, 40 years. That's something that's been brought into this process through the deliberative process. And, with that, Mr. Chairman, I think I think the services are there before you in the bill. Glad to answer any questions the committee may have.
Senator Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you bringing this before us. I also am touched by the fact that you would want this community to aspire to be as successful as the city of LaGrange, that does an incredible job and is represented by a very, very incredible senator, I think. But from a economic development standpoint and everything, the city of LaGrange has been extremely successful by doing what you hope for East Cobb to do. Now, on line 1021, on page 46, it says that basically the creation of this city will happen based on a referendum that will be presented to the citizens impacted by this incorporation. That's correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So to your point, this is this vote today and by the Senate would put this question before the voters in May of this year. And it's the voters who will ultimately decide if they want to incorporate a city. We as legislators go through this deliberative process to get the details right, but it's ultimately their decision to turn this on or not.
Correct. And again, all you're doing is requesting the referendum to let the citizens make the decision.
That's correct.
And the mayor and the city councilors, those will all be nonpartisan.
All will be nonpartisan, and they would be voted on. Should this pass in May, they'd be voted on in the November general election. You'll have perhaps the highest level of participation of any municipal election. If it's in a general election year with governors on the ballot, and the United States Senate race will have very high turnout for actually determining who the elected officials will be that will start this city and represent them for the first several years.
Well, I appreciate that. And with, I think y'all are doing things the right way. And I really appreciate this, the fact you're giving the men and women impacted by this decision the right to choose and vote for their own destiny. And thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Al.
Thank you, Representative, for bringing this before us. And I appreciate the discussion about it being a referendum question so we can let the voters decide. I have three themes of questions that I want to ask. Since we're starting with the referendum question, just some questions about the time frame, since we were just talking about it. So we wanted to put it, based on this bill, on the referendum for the May ballot, which is in about 3 months. Have there been any concerns expressed to you about the time frame of having the Board of Elections organize and educate voters about this addition to the May ballot with 3 months to go? Is there concern about like the compressed time frame for this?
Well, I appreciate the question. This is, as you know, this has been a conversation that's been going on for some years. This was contemplated for a previous session. There's been extensive town hall meetings that have happened. There's been very strong engagement. I think you can see the folks that are here today have a very, I think, accomplished citizens group to kind of get the message out. So I don't think there'll be any shortage of understanding of this in May. I think we're mindful of that. I think we want to make sure that we're, not wasting time in the legislative process to crunch the time to compress the time any more than it needs to be. But I think the question before the voters will be very clear to them. And I think May is more than adequate timing, given the outreach that's happened over the last years and months.
Sure. You had also mentioned that the November election was going to be the highest level of participation. Do you think there's merit to discussing the idea of putting the referendum on the November ballot instead to give people more time and give the Board of Elections more time
Sure.
to run this and then to actually get more participation because it is, we know primary elections have lower turnout.
It's a fair question. I think, we see in general primaries, you see high voter turnout. There's going to be a lot of engagement. You've got a, United States Senate race that's up. You've got, the governor's race, a lot happening. So the goal was not to try to steer this to some special election that's more narrow, even a municipal election. When you look at the turnout for municipal elections, in odd years, those have lower voter turnout than we would see in these the general primary, the general election. So I think the thinking is, because this issue's been so well defined and framed for folks, people who want to participate will know about it and be able to participate in May. And that, again, so that we've got time to really put together a strong process of vetting the people who actually lead the city. There's not going to be any incumbency coming in. So as you stand a city up, we felt like having more time vetting the candidates that would actually be standing to be the first mayor and council members, giving voters more time to do that. That May to November was an important time to do that. And there's pros and cons of all that, but I think that in framing of that was seen is being the more important, consideration.
Great. Thanks for walking me through that. Since we're just talking about the mayor and the city council, can we just talk for 1 second about the governing structure that's built into this bill?
You bet.
You had talked about it being an effort in representative government, which I think is a good discussion point. So the city council, as I understand in what you propose to be the new city, is 3 districts.
Mhm.
And each of the 3 districts has 2 council members,
Mhm.
one of whom will be elected at large throughout the entire city, and one which will be elected from the residents of each district. Is that correct?
No, they'll all be elected at large,
They'll all be elected.
but they've got to
okay.
live within those posts.
I see.
So,
Okay.
so for example, once the city's up and running, it's the 2030, 2029 cycle, for example, every single municipal election, every odd year election, 1 council member in each post will be up. And then when they're elected that time, 2 years later, the other council member will be up. So there's always an opportunity for each post to represent, to vote on a person for every municipal election. So they're serving staggered 4-year terms.
Got it. That makes sense. Is there actually a residency requirement stipulated that each city council member must live within their own district? Because there may have been an earlier iteration of the map or the bill that did not have that. Was that added
Yeah.
subsequently?
It is in the bill. Council has told us that the bill is adequate to stand as it is. It may be the pleasure of the committee to add a 7-word clarification to make that ironclad, and I think if it were that, in fact, I would even have some language to do that, would be friendly to that approach, that limited clarification, because that's certainly the message that's being taken out to the citizens, that there is the council members will live in those posts. I would say parenthetically, when you look at the other cities in Cobb County, in fact, many of the cities around the state, city of Kennesaw, city of Ackworth, they have councilmen and aldermen that there's no specific residence requirement. This is a more restrictive effort to ensure that there's geographic representation spread throughout the city, and that's been burned into the DNA of this. So I think we've taken extra strides to make sure that happens.
Right. And maybe we'll be open to adding that language just to make it absolutely clear that it is representative, even within the city, that it's representative government, that every district. is
Mr. Chair,
represented.
appropriate time, I've got an amendment from
That's great.
council that's prepared for that.
Wonderful.
All right.
And with that, I would value your support. Bill.
Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing this legislation. I just have a few questions as I kind of read through this legislation. Is this a strong mayor, weak city council, or how would you describe the form of government that this city would create?
It's a weak mayor system in the sense that there's a city manager to whom all the department chairs, the department heads report. Okay. There's different definitions, what weak mayor, there's some weak mayor systems that again, the mayor's appointed by council members from among the council. In this case, the mayor does run as mayor at large citywide, but it's not a city administrator model. It's a city manager model where the department heads will report to the city manager. That's commonly referred to as a weak mayor system. So that's what's being proposed.
And what are the mayor, the voting requirements at council meetings for the mayor?
The mayor can vote to break ties. There's no veto. The mayor doesn't vote as a conventionally, but if there is a tie, the mayor can vote to break ties.
I understand there are 6 city council members,
That's
correct? Have you considered having an odd number of council members?
Actually,
Because, and the reason why I asked the question is, you know how we build coalitions, and having an equal number of council members and a mayor, it's really easy for someone to build a coalition and essentially tie up the functioning of the city council, where the authority, though it may be perceived as a weak mayor, the power really would vest in that tie vote.
Yeah, it's a good question. In fact, when you look at the sort of the evolution of what's being proposed before you today as a committee, there was an initial sense that we want to be a consensus city, and that there's a desire that the vision that's being represented in the cityhood effort could be maintained. There's trade-offs. You know, the city of Lost Mountain has a different model. It's in Cobb County. The council members would amongst themselves appoint a mayor. There's the city of Thomasville and others have that model. In this case, though, as we went through that, it was debated in committee. That was initially brought to committee in the House. I think the way this is sort of developed into, hey, let's have a defined mayor. Let's move in the direction of consensus. I think there's a desire for the council to do the voting, so 4-2 works. But I do think the mayor has the ability in building those coalitions to kind of say, listen, I think in the best interest of all, let's not just defend our different posts. In the best interest of all, I can be the decider if I need to be. So I think it's actually helpful in coalition building. I think the where we landed through both public input, the meetings, and even the legislative process in the House is fleshed out where we are today.
Mr. Chairman, may I continue just a couple of the questions, please?
Yes, go ahead.
And I am correct in stating that this city is being incorporated from unincorporated Cobb. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's important. Thank you. And I heard you. The reason why I bring up the question regarding the mayor is because we've had a situation in DeKalb County where there was too much authority invested in this new city in the mayoral position, and certain privileges were taken. Have you considered precautions in reining in the power and authority of the mayor in this proposed new city?
Yes, sir. One of the reasons there's no veto power is precisely that. I think the veto pen is a very, very strong bully pulpit from a mayor. Many mayors have that. We don't have a veto power with this mayor. I think the weak city, I think the weak mayor, city manager or city administrator model is part of that as well. So as we've tried to sort of strike that balance, I think a mayor that doesn't conventionally vote, but can break ties, but doesn't have a veto, sort of strikes that balance. That's the mayor's not this outsized figure, but is able to break ties, as I think would be appropriate and might be needed.
Thank you.
Senator Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of questions for you. I thought Senator Jones was going to lead to that. How many people would be in this new city?
About 56,000 people. When you think about that, that's what I alluded to earlier, Senator. You think about the
Oh,
legacy.
did I miss that?
I'm sorry, I talk real fast sometimes. I probably wasn't real clear when I said it. But yes, ma'am. 56,000 people.
Okay.
So in size and scale, you're talking about a city that's roughly the size of the city of Smyrna, a little smaller than Marietta, roughly the same size as a Statesboro, LaGrange, Gainesville, roughly that same size city. And that's part of the question we've asked ourselves. Even some of the folks that have so, why do we need this? If Gainesville has a right to have self-representation, if Statesboro, if LaGrange is enough of a critical mass of an area to have, 6 council members and a mayor, your representative government, why shouldn't the 56,000 people in East Cobb not have the same thing, as opposed to, and again, a place that's traditionally like their county commissioner? Why does a 1 to 200,000 ratio of citizens to elected officials versus about a 1 to 8,000? That's the vision behind this.
So have you had community meetings and everybody's all in on board and happy with this city splitting
Well,
up?
there's 2 answers to that. The first one, there have been a lot of community meetings. In fact, one of the things that's been interesting in this that I think helps validate the idea behind East Cobb as it's proposed today was years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, community meetings created, there wasn't quite the consensus we're feeling around this issue today, but that working through those things and even shaping the form and some of the details about the City of East Cobb project has led to a much greater consensus. Now, I trust there's going to be someone here today for whatever reason is going to say, we don't want this. And there may be some people that come speak today. But it's really been encouraging in the town hall meetings that have happened here over the last year. This bill was filed last year, so that it's clear this biennium there could be action on this to draw folks out. It's been a real encouragement. The change in tenor and the consensus that we've seen in the last year relative to what was the conversation. 4 years ago, it was still some strong supporters, but it was more divided. I think we're seeing a real strong move towards this is good for everybody, and this is a thoughtful project. So I think the meetings this last year have really borne that out for us.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for you. You have a sign-up sheet and people from
Yeah.
this area have signed
Yes.
up to,
Yes, ma'am.
because I'd like to hear about the kind of monies that would go into this new city and how it might affect the.
Well, Senator, that's a great question. If it pleases the chair, I mean, there's been, a number of cities that have been created in the last 15, 16 years. Some have been more successful than others. I think all are kind of getting their legs underneath them. One of the things that was part of this process was, we went to the Carl Vinson School of Government, Georgia State, Georgia Tech. Those 3 universities have entities that do the studies. This study came back very favorably. In fact, as I was having these conversations with people early on, I said, guys, this may cost you a couple $100 more a year in taxes, and it shouldn't be a non-starter for you if that happens. If you want the city, that shouldn't be a deal killer. This actually, the study actually came back and said this will be revenue positive or balanced in a very, very favorable way. So I wasn't necessarily, my support for this concept wasn't hinging on that, but we were pleasantly surprised that the study came back very favorably. And I think the support here is not one of, will this cost me $50 a year less or $50 a year more, but is the overall effort, thoughtful? Is the representative government component of this, which is really front and center here? I think the fact that it's come back a very favorable study is just icing on the cake for something that folks are very favorable to.
So who actually did the study for you that you're going by? And
Georgia State.
is that a study that,
Georgia State University did the study.
okay, and is that something that we can see, or do you have?
It's been
You
you
have
can
that
center.
for
It's been
us.
available to the public, and there may be a copy here today, but we can make that available to you today.
Okay. Because as a member of the public, I probably wouldn't be looking for a study for East Cobb.
Sure.
Senator Al.
Thank you. Just to follow up on this question, the feasibility study, and I just want to say, I actually am very open to this idea of talking about
Mhm.
city. I'm asking these questions just to make sure that we are being detail oriented
Sure.
and diligent.
Sure.
Especially because many of us don't represent Cobb County.
Yep.
We should look at everything.
Yes, ma'am.
So with respect to the feasibility study, which maybe we can get a copy of, did we also look at the countywide impact? And I ask this because you can correct me if you're representing Cobb, but are there other cityhood movements in Cobb that are moving through the legislature at the same time?
There are. Yeah, we've got There are 3 that have passed committee. This is one of them. There's another one that's in committee next week. So there's as you know, city of East Cobb, there's a city of Mableton, city of Vinings, and then a city of Lost Mountain. The city of Lost Mountain is focused as really a quality of life kind of municipality. It's going to leave police and fire in the hands, and many of the services in the hands of Cobb County. So in terms of those large services, the Lost Mountain will have a large population. It's not going to have the impact on the police beats and hiring and those kinds of things. East Cobb is a full up city with full services. So I think the goal has been in this process and since last year to take feedback from the county. I think it's and as we've said before, I don't think it's incumbent upon citizens to be apologetic if there's some more staff effort to sort of for Cobb County to figure out how we're going to make these realignments happen. I think they're not blind to that, but certainly shouldn't be paralyzed by that. So I think there's when you think about the city of movements in the past, this is not the first time we've done this. When we passed Sandy Springs back in 2005, there weren't larger scale new cities online. There's been a lot of lessons learned. I've talked to council members from places, like Dunwoody, Sandy Springs, South Fulton. So we've got a pretty good track record of kind of those issues. And another reason we want to have an answer in May of 2022 is that there's clarity. May of 2022, the voters have decided there will be a new city of East Cobb January of next year, and we have a full 7 months to sort out those details, as opposed to it's decided in November. You're cramming an awful lot of things into just 2 months. We think that 7-month period gives us that runway to make good decisions and make a good implementation happen.
Just to clarify again, I'm very open to having this discussion.
Sure.
And looking at this, but just to make sure that the time frame isn't too rushed with respect to having it on the referendum in May as opposed to November, especially given that it looks like the primary sponsor of this bill is no longer in the legislature. So I just worry about taking into account all the details as we're semi.
Well, Senator, I would tell you this too. One thing that's important in this process is this is not an effort that's been carried on the back of legislators. Chairman Dollar was very careful early on that this needs to be a citizen-led effort. I think the folks that can speak today, you'll see that the civic capacity that's around this issue, that's really the heart and soul of this issue, is not hinging on Chairman Dollar being a member of the legislature to make this happen. It is a truly citizen-led effort. So again, other than the kind of the disappointment of me having to present this versus the top sponsor of this having to present this bill in committee, I know he'd love to be here. I think this is really a citizen-led effort that's not going to hinge on legislative involvement day in, day out, making this real. So.
And I just have one last question related to feasibility. Given that there's like 4 simultaneous city movements going on, has there been any feasibility study that's looked at the impact on the county overall if all 4 city movements go through at once?
Yeah, I'm disappointed Cobb County's not done that. I don't tend to want to call my own county out, but this is not some new thing. This wasn't hatched, under the cover of darkness. These bills last year were filed so that there was clarity that there was going to be an effort for Mableton, East Cobb, Lost Mountain, and Vinings. Again, I'm a proud Cobb Countyan, but I think there's I think coming to the table now, to try to sort of cast doubt on this it really masks the fact there's not been, in spite of the fact when this bill was dropped last year, Chairman Dollar brought lunch to our chairman and sat down with her and talked about this. There's not been more study by a county as substantial as Cobb. I mean, Cobb County has the resources to do studies. It's not like we're a small beleaguered rural county that can't rub 2 nickels together to do a study. It happens all the time. We've got a study that's looking at our whole zoning scheme, $500,000 study. So Cobb County has the ability to work through this. I think one could be a little bit disappointed they weren't proactive last spring working through this with us, because these were very serious efforts. So I would look maybe askance at their complaints now that there's been no study done. I think they can take that responsibility squarely on themselves.
take that time to do the studies though, at this point?
Oh, I'm sure there's Cobb County is gonna work through this. I think it's wrong-minded though to suggest, because for an entire 10 months, there's not been engagement on this, to say we need to slow the process down. That's the wrong approach. The citizens have a right to self-determination. We have a whole year we're talking about to put this in place. And I think there's ample time to work out the details to make this be a smooth transition.
If I could add a comment to that, Senator Al, the county of Fulton, which is our largest in the entire state, is almost 100% municipalized. There's one tiny little section where the Fulton County Airport is. Aside from that, the entire county is. In fact, I work very close with Senator Donzella James to help create the city of South Fulton, as well as we've created Sandy Springs, Milton, and Johns Creek, as you're well aware of. A lot of times the counties will obviously have the concern of that. However, if you look at all these years later, not only has the county performed well because they got to get out of the municipal services and focus all their time and resources on the true county services, Fulton County has actually never been healthier as a county than it is today. So I think we have the results there, certainly in Gwinnett County, Peachtree City, many cities in DeKalb County, Brookhaven, Dunwoody, Tucker, et cetera, have all actually proven to be very, very beneficial. In fact, almost all those cities, by the way, have reduced their tax rate, dramatically increased their response time for their public safety, whether it be police, fire, or EMS, have had tremendous growth in zoning. And I think their success actually really speaks for itself. So I appreciate your question. It's very valid. But at the same point, I think we've got the evidence as to those things tend to work out very well in Georgia.
Senator.
Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, and I apologize, but I just want to follow up on the question that Leader Butler had asked regarding the impact study and the demographic data. Is there a reason why we don't have that information in our folders?
I don't want to call it. I think that can be made available to you. I didn't. We certainly haven't withheld that at all. That's a public document that I think the committee can make available if it's
The reason
in any appropriate way. Yeah.
follow up, Mr. Chairman. The reason why I ask is because, this committee has been asked to vote on. Are we just a hearing, Mr.?
No, so we're going to vote today.
That we are being asked to vote on this proposed legislation. And I have no idea demographically what this city is going to look like. I don't even know what the boundaries are as compared to the rest of Cobb County. I have no information on what the city councils, their seats would look like. And all of that would have been helpful to share this information with all of us prior to voting, Mr. Chairman. And I would suggest to you that we not vote on this legislation because we do not have that information in our folders. Thank you for the map, by the way, but that's not enough.
Okay. All right. We have several that signed up. And I know we got other committees that's here within this hour. And I'm going to ask, we have 2 minutes each person. And Pamela,
Yes.
please come forward.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Senator.
State your name for the record.
Pamela Reardon. Is this on? Yeah. So I live in the middle of East Cobb cityhood, which would be the city of East Cobb. And it is basically from the Chattahoochee River up to Shallowford Road, just so you kind of get an idea, in East Cobb, takes up all of the East Cobb area, hence East Cobb. And it is 8 miles from the south to the north, and it's 5 miles from the Fulton border, which is Roswell, towards the west. Okay, and I live in the middle of that. I lived there for 22 years. And the reason why I moved there from Fulton County was not only taxes, but because it was a suburban single-family home community. And I was against it the first time when they were working on the city of East Cobb. It was too big. Now it's half the size or even less than half the size of what was the original. I am for it now because we need it to protect our single-family homes and our suburban way of life. I have seen, starting last year, the Cobb government go from adhering to the rules in zoning to an example just recently where, which would be in the city of East Cobb, which I was very alarmed at. 10 months we fought this as a community, and there were 22 changes over those 10 months. And then the very last meeting, they substituted at the last minute a map and said, oh yeah, just pretend there's a road here. And then they voted on it. And it was 128 variances, right? 51 detached and 41 or 51 attached and well, anyway, a total of 96 mixture of different housing. And they drained a lake. They drained a lake on this property, which is 33 acres. Okay, I live right 5 minutes away. They drained a lake. There was nothing. There was no FEMA report. There was no ARC. And I don't know where the water is going to go, because across the road on Shallowford, there is another lake.
Okay.
So
Thank you, Ms.
that's why I'm concerned, is because of the zoning. We want to control it.
Thank you so
All right.
much. Mindy?
Good
State your
afternoon.
name, dear.
Good afternoon. My name is Mindy Seeger. I represent the East Cobb Alliance, and we are a group of citizens who have been opposed to this effort for a number of years. And we have 1,500 members on our mailing list that are following this effort. This effort was started in late of 2018, and since then it has had 2 House bills, 3 maps, 2 committee substitute hearings with LC changes. And the co-sponsor, who was the author of the bill, resigned just last week. And I say that to say that this bill has been rushed, as you were hearing it, as a House bill prior to crossover day. Former Representative Dollar transmitted this as his last action prior to resigning just last week. We bring 2 areas of change that we ask this committee to act upon. One is this governance structure, the 6 council seats, 2 per district, and the mayor elected citywide, as we've discussed. There's no clear stipulation council candidates must live in their district only within city limits. This is found on lines 205 through 212 of the current LC you have before you. It does not clearly state the residency district requirement for those candidates' council members, and this does not prevent an HOA style of slates, all being from all living in a majority of one district. The majority of the council would all live in the same area. It's possible. It's not prevented in the legislation. That's not representative government. The election date is our second point of order we would like you to reconsider. One of the changes in the House committee substitute was to move the election from the November general to the May primary. Actually, that substitute had to be changed twice because the first time it was in there 2 different ways and it wasn't clear. The premise of this was to be able to run municipal elections for this newly formed city in November to avoid a special election in 2023. However, as we've stated with the bill author and now former Representative Dollar's resignation just last week, the governor may call for a special election to fill that vacancy anyway. This further adds to confusion for the average voter in my community and adds a burden to the local elections board, who is also tasked with redistricting data needing to be loaded. I think we can all agree that clear and accurate ballots in elections is critical and something we should all work towards. Moving to November allows citizens to digest all the changes and understand the bill in its current form and walk into that voting booth with their eyes wide open what they're deciding on. It also allows the great folks at our Cobb Board of Elections to get it right. They have a lot of data.
Okay, good. Thank you for your input.
Thank you. And if there's any questions,
We have
Senator Butler, I do have some financial information if you'd like it after.
Senator Robinson has your question.
Yes,
Excuse me. Have you been here the entire time?
I've been here
Before-
the entire time.
Okay. You can relax. I'm your friend. Did you hear when Senator Al asked Chairman Setzler concerning the language earlier dealing with the as far as the council members being from the districts and
Yes.
having to qualify as part of it to show that they were residents of that district.
Yes, sir.
So, and his response was that he had language that he was agreeable in adding into there to assure that. So that would alleviate that first concern you had. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I'm just here to make sure that that change happens.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you were aware that they had already agreed that that was something they would be able to do.
As I
Thank
was
you so
writing
much. Yeah.
writing my remarks, I didn't know that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions?
So Jones,
Yes,
Yes, sir.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have you seen any data supporting financially the city and the impact it would have on the county?
I have not seen, what we were hoping is that the county would provide what's known as an impact study. What I have read at length is the feasibility study, which leaves out a lot of the budgeted items for things like public safety. One of those proposed services is the fire department. Cobb County has ISO 1 rated fire department. We are first in class. People come from all over to see how Cobb County does things. In this bill, the assumption is that the 2 fire stations the city would acquire by state law would acquire those stations at $5,000. I have read that law at length, and as someone with a background in accounting, it clearly states land, property, and improvements. That does not mean, in my view, and if someone has a better definition, I would love to understand it better, does not mean movable equipment. Fire trucks are movable equipment. Those are not building improvements. Fire trucks, as you all probably well know, are not cheap. That is not part of the feasibility study. And I think it eats away at that proposed, surplus that the city would have as they would start in the feasibility study. It's missing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. Cindy,
Hello,
state your name.
my name is, can you hear me okay? My name is Cindy Cooperman, and I am a resident of East Cobb. I've lived in East Cobb for over 10 years now. And what drew me to East Cobb was actually the schools. East Cobb is actually very well known for the schools there in the community, the public schools. And so I became involved in the East Cobb Cityhood initiative in about March of 2021. I was not actually aware of it when it first started off, but I became much more aware, really at the beginning of the pandemic, when I started to become much more engaged with the local politics and local community, what's going on, as many people did. So when the idea came back of, should we revisit this and is it time to bring this legislation back? I was very supportive. I am very supportive. I'm on the Cityhood Committee. And so we began, and my responsibility, I'm one of the organizers. So we certainly work with the legislators and trying to bring that community feedback back in, because that was one of the criticisms of the first Cityhood initiative, was that people really didn't have a lot of awareness. So that was a really big priority for us to build that community engagement and awareness. So just a couple of numbers, and I'll be brief, but we do know that over 70% of the residents in the city of East Cobb, based on some polling data that we did, do have a high level of awareness of the cityhood effort. So certainly not being done in the shadow of darkness. The pandemic did provide some challenges about having in-person town halls, but what we did is we pivoted to some online platforms so that we could do 4 virtual town halls and really bring in the questions and concerns that people had so that we could discuss it in an open forum. And we have very high engagement on some of our other digital platforms, over 1,200 on our email distribution. We have over 4,000 people engaged with us online on our social media platforms. And we also have a petition, and the petition is really not just do you support cityhood, but do you support the right of East Cobb residents to be able to vote on it? And so we have over 450 signatures of people who we've confirmed live in the actual boundaries of the city of East Cobb.
Thank you so much. Ms. Hayes.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Hawes, and
Hawes,
first,
okay.
no problem. Thank you guys for your public service. My husband and I purchased a home in East Cobb about 14 years ago, similar to Cindy, for the schools, and love the community, the single family homes, and the character that the community has has created over time. And I, similar to Cindy, joined the effort last spring due to more informed information, community feedback from the first effort. And I am really excited about the possibility of cityhood for East Cobb. I do believe that the government closest to the people serves the people best. I desire local representation and local determination. I think it's the right of the citizens of the community to be able to determine if they want to become a cityhood. And I think it's really important for them to be given that opportunity in a referendum.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Scott?
So I'm Scott Hausman. I do live in the city of in the proposed city limits of East Cobb. First, I want to say thank you for starting with a prayer. I'm glad we can still do that. But beyond that, for me, it's about control of the zoning and so forth. And I'm not going to go over everything everybody else has said. I also know the feasibility study pretty well because I'm the finance guy on our committee. But the point for me, what came clear when we ended up with a sex shop called Tokyo Valentino within a quarter of a mile of an elementary school. That shouldn't happen. I don't think anybody in Cobb County that allowed it to happen did it intentionally. Okay. But the fact that we would have 6 people closest to the people deciding what happens, that care about what happens, will allow us to have the right things happen, whether I agree with them or not. So for me, it's about allowing the people that live in our little community, the single family home community, to have the right to control what happens there. That's it.
Thank you, sir.
Questions?
Mr. Chapman?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Craig Chapin. I live in the proposed city of East Cobb, as I have for coming up almost 50 years. If I knew then what I knew now, I would be wealthy and probably live on an island somewhere. We have seen tremendous explosive growth within our area. Moving to East Cobb is a dirt strip, going to Walton as a high school, Dodge Middle School, and Eastside Elementary School. It's amazing the difference that we've seen. I was not involved in the first committee, but found out about it back in 2018, was actually excited. And then when the effort was renewed is when I decided to join the committee and try to help be a proponent of this. Ultimately, the citizens of East Cobb is a very adept, engaged community. I am extremely confident that folks, not only as Cindy referred to some of the polling data, that people being aware, but I'm extremely confident of the citizens of East Cobb to make the right decisions for themselves as it relates to this. We are excited by the opportunity to vote, which is really what we're here asking for today. As far as the feasibility study goes and the impact to Cobb, this isn't something new. It's amazing watching some of the feedback on social media and the accusations that are made that you just find hard to even conceptualize where they came from. But ultimately, if you step back and you look at the data and you look at what's involved, not only can we be feasible, but we're taking 4 or 5, depending on how you count public services, but 4 or 5 services out of 17 that Cobb County offers. We are still live in Cobb County, proud to be part of Cobb County. This isn't us succeeding from Cobb County. It's quite the opposite. It's us stating what are those services that are most crucial and critical to the residents that live in that area. And therefore, how can we have local control of those? It's not another layer of government. It's us taking services and the expenses, as the feasibility study says, for those services. So while we do take revenue from Cobb County as part, if we became a city, at the same time, we take the expenses of all those services with it. And so what we're here today is asking for you is for the opportunity for our citizens to vote. This is not new. This is not some quick thing that's been introduced and slammed in. This is a multi-year process, and the citizens are acutely aware of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to ask Senator Alberts, the House member, come forward. You got any closing remarks?
I will just make a brief one. As we all know, we do not create cities in the Georgia legislature. We give the opportunity for citizens to vote. The very foundation of our great republic is giving people the right to self-determination. The folks at East Cobb will do what the people of South Fulton did. Peachtree Corners, Brookhaven, Sandy Springs, Milton, Johns Creek, Tucker, Dunwoody, and all of the rest. La Vista Hills voted their city down, and that's okay. They have that option, but ultimately what the voters decide, it's got to be the right answer. So I appreciate you giving them the opportunity, and I would offer up Chairman Setzler's 7-word amendment in order to clarify the concerns that have been brought forth about the person residing in the district from which they serve.
Senator Sessler.
Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the chair, council's got the amendment to be able to distribute to folks. And I can explain it, or he can explain it. It's about a 7 or 8 word clarification. Everyone has a
Let's
copy.
let legal counsel explain it to us. What number are you? 11.
So this is just a very simple amendment. It's adding on line 201, the words "and the district from which he or she is elected." So that the line 201 begins with a sentence talking about how city council members have to reside within the city for 12 months prior to them being elected. This language clarifies that they also must be a resident of the district from which the council member is elected, as well as being a resident of the city.
Any questions on the amendment?
And to understand that the council member would have to be the resident of the city. So I'm assuming the thrust behind this would be create a city, and the city will exist for 12 months, and then after that, anyone who has been a resident of that city would have to be eligible to be considered. Is that how that reads?
That is the language on how it would read going forward. There's the language in the transition part of the charter does clarify that to run for the initial city council, you have to have been a resident of the area that's defined in the city limits for a year prior to the approval of the charter in the referendum. So this is standard language. That is standard language that appears in all of the cityhood bills we've done over the past decades.
I'm sorry, so I'm not familiar with all that standard language. I'm just trying to understand what's in here.
Right.
So the transition would be for at least a year, I assume, because most of the bills that I've seen didn't have that 12 months prior. They just said they had to be a resident of the city. You put a time in here.
Correct. That almost all city charters have a requirement that someone live within the city boundaries for a certain period of time before they can run for a city council seat. And that is what this language is going in that part of the charter. There's a later part of the charter that addresses the transition period, which would be when the city is first created. So assuming the voters approve the charter in a referendum, then that's when a transition period would begin. And there's language that states that anyone living within the city at that period of time does qualify to run for office.
Mr. Chairman, that's consistent with members of General Assembly. It's the idea that you're not gaming the system and moving around and those kind of things. We felt like it was, again, just clarifying this belt and suspenders by putting them in there and making it crystal clear. That's the Senate sponsor and
Mr. Chairman, my question was not, my question was to make sure that this didn't interfere with anyone trying to run for one of those city council seats, simply that it stayed for that 12 months prior. So I just needed clarification. And if there's some other enabling legislation in here that clarifies that, perhaps I missed it or I haven't read it. Because if you create a city with this language, the transition would have to be at least 12 months before you could even have anyone run for that seat. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. This language should not in any way interfere with anyone running for the initial city council seats in that November election as it's currently called for. It's just stating that there's a residency requirement to live in that district, and for everyone who is going to be elected to the anyone who's elected to the city council after that first initial city council election has to have lived within the city and their district for 12 months prior to qualifying to run in that subsequent election.
Gotcha. I just didn't see subsequent. in here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Send it out.
Thank you so much for this amendment. I really appreciate it. I think this makes a good fix. Would you be also open to an amendment that changes the date of the referendum being on the ballot to November for the reasons that we've discussed? I agree with so much of what I've heard today, and I really appreciate everyone for coming out to testify. I do believe in self-determination, and I think this is something I'm very open to. If we moved it to November, I think this would organizationally allow for more people to participate. It would maximize the voter turnout, as you noted yourself, for this November election. And also, while we're doing that, that we can also give some time to do some more of these elements of the feasibility study on the countywide impact. Do you think that's a good compromise and something you'd be open to?
Well,
Because
Senator,
I'm happy to support this bill if
Yeah.
that was. a
Senator,
change.
I think I can speak for the Senate sponsor as well in saying we would not entertain that because again, as you know, there's a balancing act. And the balancing act is there's the issue of the underlying approval. We know we've got one of the reasons we've got this on a May general primary because we know the turnout's gonna be very strong, as there will be in the general election. And you know your questions you'd asked earlier about the implementation and sort of being ready to roll this thing out and and put it in play. I think the timing of this is really again there's trade-offs and everything, but I think the timing of having that 7-month period from the time that the city is approved by the voters to being implemented in January of 2023. I think that time and the time to have plenty of engagement, involvement, vetting of the elected officials who are going to run. I think that period of time between May and November is also very important. So I think for the turnout opportunity, I think the fact that you have more time to prepare to get the city established and vet the people that will be the mayor and the council members, I think the balance clearly tips towards this being before the voters in May. And so I would oppose that amendment.
Is this time frame of needing it to be online, as it were, by January 23, a real deadline? Like, does it have to, for what reason are we using January 2023 as the cutoff that we have to be done by then? Because it seems like if we put it on the November ballot, that we could just choose a time in the future, like nothing has to happen by.
Sure. That's part of the process. And as you talk to citizens, we have town hall meetings. You know, is this something we want to postpone for future years, or is this something we want to put in play in 2023? I just think the consensus was that early 2023 was the time to start stand the city up and get things moving. And that really, the backwards planning of that led to what I think is a really thoughtful decision for a May decision and a November election for the electeds.
But there's no reason it couldn't be a different date.
I guess as a general assembly, we could have made this 2030 if we wanted to, but I think it's just a matter of how are we informed by the consensus among community members? And I think the consensus landed where we are here.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's wonderful.
All right. What is the pleasure of the committee?
Mr. Chair, I would move that,
We need the amendment. Can we do the amendment and the bill at the same time? Second, okay. The amendment of 470032. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. You got four. Okay. All opposed, raise your right hand. 2 against. Amendment carries. As the bill is amended, LC 4714445S, do we have a motion? Second by Senator Dixon. All in favor, raise your right hand. Yes.
I have a motion to table, asking to vote on waiting to pass legislation. I have not seen this proposed city, and I would move that we table it until such time that information is provided.
We have a motion to table and a second. It's already a motion on the floor, though.
Yeah, but mine is a superseded motion, Mr. Chairman.
That's true.
I tell you, we're gonna listen to the preacher today and we're gonna be kind. We'll have your vote on your substitute motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We have a motion to hold the bill. All in favor, raise your right hand. 3 in favor. All against. 3 in favor of moving forward. It fails. All right. Senator Robertson.
Yes, my motion still stands as.
All right. All in favor for LC 471445S as amended. Raise your right hand.
No.
You have 4. All opposed? 3 against. Well, the chairman can vote. Well, either he wants to vote or not vote. I like to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members.
Bill does pass 4-3. This meeting is adjourned.